Well, it's history time again, so who else would we bring into our studio but our good friend Charles McElwee, who is the Vice President of the Board of Directors for the Greater Hazleton Historical Society and Museum. I like the topic you want to talk about today because it's local news and supporting local news. So how'd you come up with this idea?
Yes, it's so important to support local news, especially in this fragmented age that we live in. So there was a documentary recently run by HBO called Deadline Artists, and it profiled Pete Hamill, who was a famous writer. He was editor of the New York Post at one point, and Jimmy Brislin, who was this cantankerous, at one point considered America's most famous columnist in the 70s, and he wrote for the New York Daily News. And the documentary itself was a portal to an age when print journalism reigned, and it defined every city, community, region, and their writing was memorable for what they observed in New York City. They were chroniclers of New York through the years, whether it was after Kennedy's assassination or John Lindsay when he was mayor through the early 90s. And Hamill himself, who is also a novelist, he was an inspiration for my writing. I've always admired his work, and he really shaped me. But the documentary itself, it concludes with an important stat. The New York Daily News in the late 80s had over 400 editorial staff, and that major city newspaper is down to 40. A major city newspaper down to 40, and it's just a reminder of how important it is to subscribe to your local newspaper, support it, and watch and support your local news.
Absolutely, and here, marking 25 years right here at our station at SSB TV, we know the importance of that as well, and always encourage people to, pay attention to and follow the local news. And there is also a lot of the local news, I know, on display down at the Greater Hazleton Historical Society Museum. You can see, past newspapers or how things and how the area has changed. So they all tie in together, the news, the history of the area.
Absolutely. The newspaper is a platform that chronicles your local community's history. And whether it's SSPTV, been around for 25 years for the local news and adapting and transitioning in response to technological advances through social media, et cetera. And the same goes for newspapers. So it may not mean a subscription to a print paper, but a digital subscription. We are adapting, but at the same time, we're seeing, if you look at the map of the country right now, so many regions of the country no longer have local newspapers. And we have this continued consolidation of papers, and it does impact communities at the local level. Local news holds institutions accountable. It brings the community together through just knowledge of events and highlighting what people are doing in the community. And that's what's so wonderful about the Hazleton Standard Speaker and SSPTV, that we are so community-based. And I wrote for the Standard Speaker, essays that chronicle the area's history, and there's just a tremendous joy in holding that paper and just knowing what's going on in Greater Hazleton.
Absolutely, and when Sam Lasan Sr. talked about starting this station 25 years ago, he said the reason being was he wanted neighbor talking to neighbor, and that when the bigger stations and outlets covered something, it was usually only to tell the bad stuff, not the good stuff.
So true, and they often overlook what goes on here. They don't have a pulse on the actual area. So that's why it's so wonderful to have these local platforms where you are able to learn about what's going on here and to support your community, because without a newspaper, without local churches, without just various nonprofit organizations, without that civic framework, a community collapses. And what makes Hazleton unique is that we continue to support those institutions, and it's important that we continue to do so.
Very important point to make. And again, as we always say, if you want to find out more about the history of our area, stop in at the Greater Hazleton Historical Society and Museum. Make an appointment for a tour to learn so much more. And they're always taking donations. You can go to their website,
HazletonHistory.org.
All righty. Thanks for coming in, Charles. Hope to see you again soon.